All right. What's going on, everyone? We have a new episode today on the Unsilent Church podcast, and we got a special guest in the building today. We have, we could say this, a matriarch in our city here in Phoenix, someone who's been doing the work for years and years and years, a dear sister of all of us. And so I'm super excited of the guest that we got. Ramon, you want to go ahead and properly introduce our guest?
Well, she's been on before. Excited to have her on again. Our friend, Kit Danley. Kit is the founder and president of Neighborhood Ministries, which I'd love for you to share a little bit more about. I'll just read the statement on the website, that the mission of Neighborhood Ministries is to be the presence of Jesus Christ, sharing his life-transforming hope, love, and power among distressed families of urban Phoenix to ignite their passion for God and his kingdom. It's a great mission, but that mission is not abstract. It means very practical things that you guys have done for years and years, decades. So Neighborhood Ministries runs clinics, after-school programs, job training. Almost everything. The name is perfect, Neighborhood Ministries. It's whatever it takes to care for our neighborhoods, but particularly those who are most vulnerable, I'm sort of explaining everything already myself.
There you go.
But I'd love for you to share a little bit about, Neighborhood Ministries, what it is, what it does, and that will, from there, I'll sort of lead us into our topic.
Okay, thanks so much for inviting me back.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful experience for me to be with the three of you.
It's our privilege.
And your important podcast on Silent Church. So thank you that you're committed for the church to be unsilent. I love that. Neighborhood Ministries is 43 years now. And
wow.
It's wild, huh? So a long journey. You can go on our webpage to learn our history. But we're committed to the scriptures and living those out. It's one thing to know them, the 2,000 verses of God's heart for the poor. And because those all lead to action. So that's what we've been about all these years.
That's good.
But we're also highly relationally committed. So we're in our third generation with lots of our families. One example would be in our preschool, some of our teachers were kids at Katie's Kids.
That's crazy.
Yeah, starting at age 3. And now they're teachers in that classroom.
That longevity is amazing.
Yeah, and so...
Yeah, no, that's for real.
Yeah, we have lots of those kinds of stories because what happens when you pray a prayer, God, break my heart for the things that break your heart. That's an important prayer. It launched World Vision, launched all kinds of responses, global and local, as people pray a prayer like that. But what happens is you fall in love with real people, and then you start addressing the systemic breakdown that causes people to be poor for generations. And then you have to get involved in rewriting human beings' stories.
Wow.
With programs and practices, but it's really has a theological beginning.
Yeah.
So a lot of that work involves all sorts of different types of people, but for sure one of the groups that you've ministered really well to over the years have been immigrants. And so one of the reasons we have you on and the topic of our show is to talk a bit about what's been going on with immigrants in our country right now. Our administration has enacted policies that I want to say are dehumanizing and cruel, and
that's being charitable.
To the ways in which so we have immigration laws. This is not sort of a statement that we shouldn't have immigration laws, but the ways in which they're being followed and enacted are doing things that I think are very unsettling. And I know a lot of people hear that, and because of our polarized times, people immediately put up different walls around that. They might immediately say, well, that can't be true, or maybe it's not as bad as you think, or all sorts of different things. And so, but as Christians, I think we want to sort of really bring it at ground level. And you already said God has a heart for the poor. All people are made in the image of God. And so that immediately says the amount of dignity we show towards them. But I think it's okay. We should say And God especially wants us to show dignity and care for those who are poor, for those who are marginalized. And so, right now we've ICE conducting raids around the country, setting up detention centers. In some of the statistics we had pulled up for us indicate that a lot of the people, undocumented immigrants being targeted now, many of them don't have criminal records, and that was a promise that was made initially. As of May, 44% of them didn't have a criminal record, and so already we're seeing things accelerate in directions that we were told would not go. I can go on and on here with this, but I don't want to take up too much more time. It's a long setup to say, so Kit, just share with us what's been happening. What are you seeing? What are the things that are occurring in the populations that you are very much embedded in?
Yeah, and it's a terrible time for sure. And but I think because yours is a local podcast and we're talking about Phoenix or Arizona right now, the realities of both the church's response as well as Arizona's response to immigration and to immigrants has been flagrant and in some cases horrific. We were at a time with SB 1070 in 2010, the first state to have a show me your papers law. So the kinds of things that are happening today, yes, accelerated, Alligator, Alcatraz, all this funding is, we were mentioning earlier, for private prisons and what's happening with the big ugly bill and that type of thing in terms of the amount of money being given to ICE to accelerate all of the cruelty. So all of those are true and real and terrible. But that has been Arizona for a long time. When we began in the 80s, during Central Americans' civil wars in Nicaragua and Guatemala and Honduras and so on, and there is all this mass migration north, Arizona was in the thick of it. So our church actually, and Neighborhood Ministries itself, was built around the stories of the fleeing Central Americans in the 80s. So even ourselves at Neighborhood Ministries, we go back to how we were theologizing, contextualizing, responding to what was happening in Central America. And so in some ways, and I think I've said this to you, John, in the past, we've said to one another here in Arizona, whether we're advocates or church people or allies or whoever we are standing on the issues of today in terms of our response, that we have muscle memory is the word we used. This has been who we've been here in Arizona.
That's a good term. That's great. That's a great picture.
Yeah, for a long time. And in my case, since 1982. And I've become a church historian of sorts in terms of the work I do. So when I study, for example, Oscar Romero, I not only can sit with El Salvador and sit with his story and sit with Vatican II and all of the things that were happening at the time, the birth of a theological response to oppression that was coming out of Latin America. Anyway, I say all of that to say that's my reference point for today. We've been here before. Sheriff Joe, the anti-immigrant pieces of legislation that were flooding Arizona's legislature, where we were the point of focus for the world when we began responding to what was happening 2013, our last attempt at comprehensive immigration reform in our U.S. legislature. And we were in Washington, D.C. during those last days, birthed a global prayer response to immigration reform that, of course, we didn't have, never came, and we're bearing the fruit of it right now. People like me and people like us, there's lots of us, including the generation that was born into leadership here in Arizona out of SB 1070. We've learned how to respond and how to tell the truth. And we've also learned how to be, and this is to the point of this podcast, to be unafraid. We learned then, we've learned all these years, that God's voice, God's prophetic voice, the Old Testament, God's love for the least, last, lost, and left out, the widow, the orphan, and the immigrant living in the land, his priority, God's priority, we've learned that actually he wins. Oscar Romero preached that months before he died, that love wins. God's word, God's love, and those that align themselves with God's word and God's love will win. And so that's why we stay engaged. We can't give up.
Yeah. I mean, that's helpful.
Is that a good enough response? Or do you want me to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it would be, helping people realize this has happened before. And we've seen how often the church doesn't do anything and is silent. But we don't have to keep doing that type of history. There's ways in which you can respond even now. But before we get into that, though, I mean, I do think it'd be good. I mean, maybe just one or two things you can share about what the experience of people is right now, for particularly immigrants. I mean, personally, I know many who are afraid, who aren't leaving their homes, people who have been swept up for really no reason at all, and not allowed legal counsel, not allowed to sort of get any of some of the basic things we do for some of our own American citizen prisoners. I mean, I'd be good for people to sort of hear a little bit of that, and then maybe sort of draw a little bit more in terms of where do we go from here?
Yeah, there's a part of it that's, as you talk about like the fact that we've been here before, there's something about this that feels different. And so like in that way, like hearing, because you know the families and people whose family members are, going through a lot of these things, so to talk about like what's different now than what was happening in the 80s, or maybe it is the same, but it seems like it's coming. You had Sheriff Joe, but now it feels like now this is federal. Now this is, because you talked about systemic things, and people often when you say systemic are like, no, that's not a thing. It's local. It's a isolated incident. But now you're like, no, it's a mandate. Then there's money. Then that money gets spread out, and then there's for-profit, and there are all of these different organizations that get involved, and then you have the things that happen at the local level, but it's an entire structure,
Maybe one way to respond to that is if people think that somebody's making this up, they're listening to the wrong media outlets. Find a better podcast, or find a better outlet for the true stories that are being proclaimed, whether it's a story from New Jersey, some place in Fort Lauderdale, or San Francisco or Phoenix. So the stories are real human beings who have been rounded up at their point of business, Home Depot or whatever.
Bus stops, too.
Bus stops, I mean, you name it. And it's, these untrained ICE officers, they've had to deploy all kinds of people that really aren't equipped to do their mandate, which is to round up, 3,000 a day, whatever we want to.
And anyone who knows anything about hiring is like, when you hire that many people that fast, you don't go through a like vetted, thorough training process. You just can't. Like, it just does not happen when you're trying to like push results. And
much of what we see, therefore, on media outlets in terms of, everyone's using their phone to record all of these incidents. And so we're seeing these people, these ICE agents, with masks or however they're clothed at the time, sometimes also with no ID because of the ways in which they're rounding up mercenaries and so on. But anyway, all that to say, it just creates a blanket fear. So, yes, people are afraid to go to the grocery store. They're afraid to get their kids registered for school. They're afraid of going to work. I was in the hospital yesterday with a friend, was with someone whose father has been in the U.S. since he's 60 now, has been in the U.S. since he was 14. Wow. He remains undocumented, has worked all his life, and he won't go out the house. And never, ever. He's afraid to get in his car. And so that's just yesterday's story. I mean, it's really often one of the things that advocates in our community have been doing for many, many years, and that we also participate in, and that's teaching immigrants know what their rights are. So we do Know Your Rights trainings, and not just Neighborhood, but lots of us do these trainings, and they carry cards. They're little red cards that indicate what they're, so that they can remind themselves also if they're pulled over, what their rights are. The problem is that the government today isn't following the rules.
Right. So there are rules about this, and we're ignoring them.
Right. And so that...
And trying to rewrite them, it seemed like.
That accelerates the fear, right? Because your neighbor told you a story where you used your red card and it didn't do you any good. Mm-hmm. They still took you. And there aren't enough lawyers to go around. Neighborhood Ministries has opened a legal aid clinic for immigrants and for immigration. And we're connected to lawyers who can take the complicated cases and so forth, but everyone's backlogged. Mm-hmm. But we still get involved. And so another story is, so Jimmy Martinez, our pastor in our church, was doing an accompaniment. And accompaniment is you're trained as a person to go with someone into their immigration court hearing. Mm-hmm. And you just show up for your duty because you're a trained person, and then you get assigned someone who you're going to walk into court with just to be there. It's a ministry of presence, really, because you're not a true legal advocate. But so it was the basis of his message on Sunday morning, and the scriptural context was Jesus in Gethsemane, where he said to his friends, I just need you to be with me. Could you stay awake?
Watch and pray.
Awesome if you could stay awake. I'd like you to also pray. But the point of Jimmy's message was, I don't want, Jesus himself saying, I don't want to be alone. So this decision that we all have the opportunity to make is to join people in a ministry of presence in their fear. This woman was terrified of just showing up for her court. She was just presenting herself because this was her date for the series of appointments you have, whether it's an asylum case or whatever your immigration status is. And so many people are just so alone in this fear space. So as the church, what better thing to do than to respond to our brothers and sisters, most of whom love Jesus, inside what it feels like to be them today. People are being taken into custody who have been here for more than 10 years. Sometimes people use that as the metric. Well, we should care about them if they've been here for at least 10 years. We're talking about people who are being arrested who have been here for 40 years, who have raised children, who have businesses, who own homes.
Contributing, hiring people.
Who hire people.
All the things we want. Yeah.
Exactly, and who have been baseball coaches and church members, pastors are being arrested. So we're in to your point, yes, in some ways this is such familiar territory, but it's so accelerated. But I don't think we've ever said, that I can remember anyway, that cruelty was the point.
Right.
And it is today. Cruelty is the point.
to what degree, to what value is there to really sort of awaken the church's involvement, the church's almost, call it complicit in it, but our choice, like the church made by the numbers what looked like a very deliberate choice to put this kind of leadership forward. And now when you see everything going on, I think there have been some that's like, oh, this is not what we expected, but this is what we have, and I referenced, in the letter that King wrote when he was in the Birmingham jail and talked about the different ways in which churches were involved and didn't support and were silent to what he was doing. And even today, you think like, no, there were a lot of church people who, again, I think genuinely love God, made a decision, and now there's all this pain. And I go to what is their value in sort of calling us to account, and there is, I think, a need for repentance to say, you made a decision. We made a decision. Like, it's almost like family. You're just like, why did we make such a decision that was so unlike not gleaning to the edge of your field such that the foreigner, the least of these, could come and have their fill? And we said, we don't want that. We want Barabbas. We keep finding ourselves on the side that actually isn't the best side. And I think people even forget, like during the civil rights period, like we romanticize King now, like we forgot that he got assassinated. Like Martin Luther King did not die of old age. Like he was not liked. He was like FBI's most wanted. There was like a lot of things. There's a lot of conspiracy around him. They tried to find dirt, and so it seems like there was a large volume of people who were like, he's not a good guy. We all say he's a good guy now, but then that was not the case. And now here with immigration issues and all the money that's going there, detention centers, it's like, man, church, why do we keep making the same decision, the same kinds of decision, and then find us in these kind of conversations? So.
Right. So I think it's always good to root for Americans, to root today's story and our African-American story. So because there's so much to learn from it. Mm-hmm. So the letter from the Birmingham jail reminds us theologically why the church is absent, right? Obviously it's a plea for the church to engage.
Yeah.
So I did a march 150 miles with a bunch of people from over 11 days from Tijuana to LA. And we ended up in front of the detention center. And maybe 30 of us had 2 minutes to say something from this stage.
Wow.
By that time, I had 11 days to pray. What 2 minutes of word would God give me? And I actually came behind old civil rights leaders who were in front of me, speaking before me. In other words, this was a moment. This was 2017, and so this "where is the church" conversation has been in front of me for decades, for a fact, but definitely at that moment, because the Lord said, "That's your word. Where is the church?" And a lot of people put those words out, quoting me as if somehow I had invented something on social media for that moment. We were in front of the LA detention center. Our whole march was about immigration reform and immigrant rights. And all evangelicals, by the way, marching. And anyway, all that to say, that question should hang over us. I look at you, Vermont, as a pastor. I mean, it should hang over every church leader in our city. Where's the church nationally? We have to ask the question in such a way that, as you say, brings us to repentance, but breaks our heart. And we have to actually demystify the fact that if King was marching in Phoenix today, I would be there. Right? Because that's
like the assumption that I would have been on the good side.
That's the assumption.
Yeah.
And yet, if you're not marching today, you wouldn't have been there then. And that's always been my comment. It's that today's the only history you have. Today's the only time you have to test whether or not you actually believe the scriptures, whether or not. so I'm finishing my chapter on Abraham Heschel, who marched over the bridge on that important day
In Selma.
from Selma to Montgomery, and you can see him. He's an old rabbi next to King, and what caused him to join King was not only the fact that his family had been destroyed in the Holocaust, and he was this unbelievable theological giant of his day, but he had written his important treatment on the prophets. The prophets said, "Today is the day, only day. Today is the only history you're going to have. You're going to have to act today." And he saw in King, who obviously also loved the Old Testament, the prophets, and the Moses story, but all that affinity they had for the way God speaks into this time. It isn't good to say, that's who I've been theologically, aligning ourselves with some historical moment, if we're not allowing the words of the prophets to speak into our today. So today, we must respond, or we don't believe it. Now, the role of the church, does it only belong to the pastors? No, of course not. It belongs to anyone who claims Christ and has chosen to still live in community with other brothers and sisters. I know a lot of people leave the church today because they can't stand the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But I believe in the church, and I believe in its role, and I believe in its power, but I still ask, with that same level of pain, where is the church?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, that question is still one of those questions that people ask today. And so what can the church, I think that's a good segue into so what can the church be doing? You know what I'm saying? What would you say to the church today?
Yeah, there is so much to do.
Okay.
And the church is responding. Here's the good news. Yeah, we're going to always be the remnant, right? And so that's okay. That's just kind of the life people like us live. However, there's lots of expressions of the remnant all over this country. And
that's
so the things that we can do here in Phoenix and in Arizona are being done all over the place. So I'm going to mention a few.
Okay.
So advocacy is really important. That means that we bring our voice into all kinds of places. And some people are great at social media. Bring your advocacy voice there. This isn't a time to beat anybody up, but it is a time to preach the truth. But some organizations lead the way in terms of what advocacy can look like with our Congress. So I'm going to mention an organization called World Relief. They've done a lot of work globally around refugee issues and refugee crisis. They've been, some of the people that work for World Relief I know, they've done a lot of advocacy here in the U.S. around immigrant rights and immigration reform. And so going on World Relief's page, they really stay on top of what's happening in the Congress and who you can call about what. And so calling your legislators, getting involved, sometimes even organizing a trip to Washington to meet with one of your representatives really does work, but it's also a really important training space. But training is involved in all of this. I'm going to mention the National Immigration Forum, because they stay on top, as it relates to advocacy, they stay on top of what's happening in the legislature nationally regularly, so you can find out what bills are going on and so forth. Also what pushback is being asked for and what responses. I mentioned what we did in 2013, going down and fighting and opening the prayer tent, and the global world showed up, and it was very exciting. But you never know where this type of advocacy, that my point there, it will lead a congregation or a group of people. And I'll say in light of that, find your allies. There are people, and I know this is a challenge for the church, but I'm going to highly recommend it, that you find allies across all sectors. Maybe they're not Christian, maybe they're multi-faith, maybe they just do one thing well and they're kind of crazy out there, chaining themselves to things. The point is there's allies in our city that are doing really important movements toward change, even if all they're doing is proclaiming what's horrible.
Yeah.
So when we started realizing we had to work outside the church in terms of finding our teammates, it was so liberating.
Yeah.
When I first showed up, this was years and years ago, to try and find an ally, an advocate around immigration reform, I met with a lady who had never met an evangelical before. She was super afraid to meet me because she thought, what is this person going to say to me? Probably something ugly. You know, she had these biases. And so when we spent the next 3 hours together, she said, you know, you have to stay an evangelical. I get how you'll probably be tempted to want to leave your tribe.
Yeah.
But
Like a ministry to evangelicals.
but there has to be a voice inside your group that allows people like us, and she was talking about herself, she happened to be Catholic, to be able to find allies across all our barriers. So that advocacy.
Yeah, that's good.
Accompaniment training. I mentioned accompaniment earlier. There's training for that. And so I'm going to mention the organization called Corazon. It's a nonprofit organization that Neighborhood Ministries founded quite a few years ago now. And they work with the faith community to do all sorts of training as well as advocacy.
Yep.
So if you want to be trained to actually go with an immigrant into their court and have that ministry of presence and just be with them, pray with them, make sure they recognize that they're not alone, there is training for that. And so you'd contact Corazon for the accompaniment training. Join a vigil. So sometimes we have spontaneous vigils. We just find out about somebody being detained or something coming up that's that needs public notice. It might be a piece of legislation. It might be someone's been arrested, whatever it is. And so what I'm trying to do, and want you guys to know this, is to let Caleb at Surge know every time I know there's a vigil. Right? So we say vigil, sometimes you can say protest. It's that type of thing. It's where people come with their signs, come with their presence, come with their bodies, and sometimes there's a little effort to put together a program. Sometimes we just stand together and pray. And again, there are a lot of them are pop-up, and so we have to kind of keep everybody informed. And so I texted Caleb before I came today to say, is it okay if I do a little shout out that you'll be on point for Surge, and I'll get vigil notices off to him.
So Surge Network, if you subscribe there, then you'll begin to get newsletters that will let you know when those things happen.
Yeah. And if they're pop-ups, it just has to go out through social media.
Yeah.
We might not have any.
Oh, yeah, so that's even better. So follow
Right,
Surge
we
on
might
social
not
media.
have that much advance notice. Some of them.
Do you post these on Neighborhood Ministries social media?
Sometimes it just depends on. Usually it's just our informal networks that we get out,
Okay.
just to let everyone know, hey, we're meeting down at ICE, and we're at 7, and we're.
Yeah, because I think this is one of the most, out of all the things you've listed, this is like an easy first step. Just show up.
Just show up.
Just show
right.
up and be there and be present. That means a lot.
So getting a little better at coordinating how we get the word out, especially because a lot of the vigils are pop-ups. So on your phones, there's a few apps. One is the Ice Block, if you've heard of it. It's called Ice Block, and it's an app, and it says when ICE is in your neighborhood. It locates your address, and then you find out. Because sometimes if, say, for example, ICE is down the block from your church, you might want to show up and just find out what they're doing. If nothing else, you get your phone out.
And just so you know, that we've been saying the word ICE, and I'm sure some of our audience knows what that means, but for those that may not be familiar with ICE, it stands for Immigration Customs Enforcement. And so when we say ICE, that's what we're referring to.
Yeah.
Just wanted to educate some of the people that may be like, ICE, what's going on?
Now, Ice Block is a national entity. In other words, its app is used all over the country. But there's another one that's local called the Phoenix Rapid Response. And it's located on Instagram, Phoenix Rapid Response. And it does the same thing. It lets you know if ICE is in your neighborhood and your neighbor is being detained, or they're at Home Depot or that type of thing. There's the Puente is another ally organization here in town, PUENT, Puente, and they do lots and lots of trainings for the community, and they have a new Migra watch, La Migra, the immigrant, that's the ICE, La Migra. Migra watch. And so Puente. And then I'll do a shout out for Neighborhood Ministries and our legal aid clinic. We are very affordable, sometimes free, and to meet with anybody who doesn't really know how to find the legal help that they need. And that's just look us up on our webpage, Neighborhood Ministries, and you'll be able to find out how to contact us if you need legal help.
That's good.
Man, this has been a great conversation, and I love the historical backdrop of talking about immigration, but also just ways in which that we can get involved and we can be able to be a faithful presence, as you said. Also, too, having the different allies across denominations, across religions, across whatever. I need to probably chew on more and just process the idea of because it goes back to some of the stuff that we were saying. We have to go outside of the church because the church tends to be silent on certain issues in order to find your teammates, as you said.
Yeah.
And
I think if we're just on the side of good, you're just sometimes, again, it's like that Matthew 5 situation where it's you'll be like sons and daughters of your Father in heaven, who brings rain and sun on both the good and the evil. Just just and unjust. Be on the side of good.
Yeah.
We don't have to be tribal in that sense and be well, if you're not evangelically good, then no, just if you're on the side of good, then we can find a reason to work together.
Well, Kit, thanks for this conversation. Thank you for all of the different action steps that we can take. And for those that are listening, we would love for you to, of course, share, and comment, but more than important, for you to actually pray and get involved. Get involved. That is the message. Get involved. Do something that is worthwhile so we can be able to be good to all people.
Yeah.
With that said, love people, love God. We're out.